All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I have the privilege of having my friend Connor Shank. We've known each other for a really long time, on to talk about how small businesses can be thinking about and implementing AI. Connor's been getting involved with AI and specifically around helping small businesses to understand how to implement AI effectively in their business and kind of how they should think about it. And so I'm just excited to chat with you about some of the things you're seeing. So to kick us off,
and thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited for this conversation. So I know you've done a pretty good amount of research around small businesses and what they've done, and had a lot of conversations specifically around AI with small business owners to understand where the market's at. So I'd love it if you just kick off a little bit of what you've been hearing small business owners say how they think about AI, and then the challenges that they see facing implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is probably one of the most hyped and also one of the most underutilized, technologies out there right now. And when I say underutilized, it's I've talked to so many people who really fall into kind of two camps when they actually use it. It's either AI is amazing and sorry, just got a call. AI is amazing, and it's totally going to transform the world. And others, are saying, it's cool, it's a party trick, but I tried ChatGPT and it was laughable, right? And so there is this like crazy hype cycle around it, which is warranted, I think, but it's really not understood by people. I think most people outside of the outside of the AI community that are actually building AI tools. And so unfortunately, I think there's a lot of it's just such a rapidly expanding environment right now that a lot is going over non-technical users' heads, and they're seeing a lot of this stuff and they're wondering, but how do I actually use this? Like, that's cool. How do I get that to work for me? So we my partner and I launched a company in August, and between August and December, I had 113 market research interviews with prospective customers and people that would be in our target market. And I asked them every time there was two questions that I asked each one. First question was, do you feel like you are confident that you know where your industry is going over the next 12 to 24 months as a result of AI? And the second question was, do you feel confident that you have the knowledge and the tools needed to keep up and to not be left behind as your market changes? And the answer to both of those questions was no. But the overall sentiment about AI was very positive. So
yeah, and it's interesting because as I've had conversation and have been seeing AI, I feel really similar, where the AI enthusiasts, I think, are overhyping, where they are over their skis in as far as what AI can actually do. And a lot of the use cases they talk about, when I've actually used them or tried to implement them in the ways that they're talking about, or talk to people who are actually implementing these things, it can't quite do a lot of the things that people hype it up to be able to do. But then there's other use cases, to your point, where AI is incredibly capable that are not being used as effectively as they could. And those are pretty much ready to go right now, right? Like immediately, and can add an incredible amount of value. And so if you're on the outside looking in, it's really hard to know what's real and what's marketing hype. And then as a small business owner, there's so many different areas that you can focus on in your business. It's like, okay, should I just sit on the sideline and kind of wait for the industry to mature and then jump in then? Or am I going to really miss the opportunity for huge advantage?
Yeah.
And I think both of those positions are actually fairly well warranted, because you can jump in, spend a bunch of money on something that can't actually end up fulfilling what you need right now. And that's a huge issue. But on the flip side, if you do it right and you really implement it, AI effectively in your business now, you have a huge strategic advantage over competitors that aren't really thinking about it. So what areas do you see with small businesses that they could, I guess maybe a better way to phrase that question is, how do you think small business owners should think about implementing AI? Like, what should their approach be to get the most value with also not just throwing a bunch of money at something?
Yeah. I think the most helpful way of thinking about AI is not looking at AI and saying, how can I use this in my business? But it's actually the inverse. What are the processes in my business that I do, in a repetitive basis, or what are the rule-based processes that I have in my business or on my team? Those types of questions can more helpfully frame how we think about using AI practically and cutting through a lot of the hype. I've talked to so many business owners that want to use AI just so that they can say they are using AI, or they're looking at different tools and saying, how can I use this? And I humbly would submit that that's probably not the most effective way of doing it. But looking at your processes is probably the most helpful thing. Documenting, what of those are, like I said, repetitive and rule based and resource intensive. It could be a third, kind of the 3 R's. But for most business owners, I think they're probably going to stay within those first two, because those are the low hanging fruit. Then once you have those processes defined, then you can think about, how could I use AI to solve this particular task? And there's a lot of talk about agents and agentic AI right now. And I get it, we're doing the same thing. But I think users or business owners, not even in the mid-market space. I was actually talking to a gentleman who is the CEO of a rather large company, and they don't have an AI strategy. And so we were having this conversation. We're going to be talking again here pretty soon. But this idea of agentic AI, it's every single person who's talking about AI right now is talking about that, but that doesn't really roll back into, okay, so what does that mean for me? And I think in the very near future, and some of this is even here today, instead of hiring people, into roles, I think we can start thinking about, how can I hire, an AI tool or an AI, agent, quote unquote, to tackle this particular task. And so it doesn't mean that AI is going to replace jobs. In fact, with our company, we're actually pushing back against that narrative very actively. But we instead of hiring somebody to fulfill a certain set of tasks, some of those tasks we don't need them to do, and we can keep that person in their zone of genius rather than having to do a lot of these manual things. And we really feel really strongly about building AIs that amplify the value of human, or amplify human value and mobilize human value, rather than trying to displace or how to get the same amount of work done with less people. If it doesn't require human empathy or human creativity or human emotion, whatever it means to be human, right? We want to say, how can we automate that so that as you're interacting with your customers and as you're serving your market, you can do that more fully.
Absolutely.
That's the way that we
I have a follow-up question, but real quick, I had to switch something on my mic. Am I still coming through clear?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think this is true just kind of across the board anyway, when it comes to scaling your business, whether you're trying to do that or, automating a process, whether it's AI or you're using, any kind of automation, trying to automate a process that isn't super clear and isn't process driven, rule driven is kind of silly, right? And, so if somebody comes in and they go, hey, there's this marketing thing, we want to automate as much of our marketing as possible, but they're not doing anything on repeat at all. It's like, well, good luck with that. And then people also try automating things where they shouldn't, like trying to automate tons of outreach, whether they're using AI or they're doing it manually, with a dumber version of automation through software. That's probably not the best thing to automate, but there are a lot of things you can. So like if I'm going to take a video and I'm going to transcribe it, there's no reason to have a human sit down and transcribe a video, right? That would be silly. That's a great use case where it's like, hey, everybody's life is going to be better having that automated by machine, and then maybe having a human go in and make some correction. And then, we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, taking that transcript and having AI write you a draft post or a draft article from that. That's a great use case. And it lets your copywriter spend way more of their time writing the actual copy for whatever, a newsletter or a post, instead of sitting down and watching a video and transcribing it and taking notes,
That's right.
Then they're going to be able to produce way more than they would have before. And in fact, like if it's a business owner who owns a marketing company, they're going to be able to charge probably the same amount, maybe even more, because they're going to have faster turnaround times, and they could pay their copywriter a higher wage because they're spending a lot less money doing that. So the copywriter can make more per hour, way higher production, and at the end of the day, they're focusing more on the creative output. So I mean, to me, that's an area where you could first create a process, then maybe do some simple automation, and then when it makes sense, then go, okay, how do we use AI to make this even more effective? Rather than, to your point, going, what AI is out there, and how do I just like pull that into my business to make AI work? Like, that's a recipe for spending a bunch of money on something that probably won't actually impact your business.
Right. One of the, I don't know, shadow sides or side effects, I guess, of generative AI is that it lowers the barrier of entry to thought leadership and domain expertise. And so you have people who don't know as much about a topic, but they can create content or they can communicate with a level of authority that is beyond what their experience is. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. But there's nothing. I still believe that there's nothing that replaces experience and true domain expertise. And so I think AI is really gonna amplify that rather than be a detractor. So yes, there could be a flood of let's go with copywriters and marketing professionals, right? I mean, I could go to ChatGPT or Claude and I could give it a simple little prompt, generate some marketing copy, right? Everybody can do that. But I don't know the first thing about copywriting and drafting good copy that makes sense to my prospective buyer, or whether it be a hard tech versus software or biotech, whatever that is. There's nuance in all of those different domains, right? I don't have that. So even though I can produce a piece of content that might sound like it's educated, it's a little bit of a facade. And so I think that, domain expertise like you have, it's I think you would be able to get more out of AI, using generative AI, like some of these tools and others, than somebody else that doesn't have that type of expertise and is just trying to fumble through it.
Because you know what to train the AI models on. Also, it's like, okay, if you have frameworks that you use every single time with a client, and then you're going to manually go through and analyze a ton of data that they have, you could use AI to go through and analyze, do an initial analysis on that data to point you in the right direction. Then have a human look. Like, let's just use this as an example again. The only reason I'm doing this is I want to think of some like practical use cases that I've seen in small businesses. So let's say you have Salesforce data about all of your sales that you've done in the last 10 years as a business. And you've gone across a bunch of different markets, different industries, different use cases for what you're doing. You could do an analysis to figure out what your margins are in different industries. So you can decide, where should we be focusing our effort? Where are the best opportunities for us to have the highest margin, and make the most use of our internal expertise. So you could gather a bunch of that data. Now, first, AI is only going to be as good, the output's only going to be as good as the input, right? So first you have to have good quality data going in. Well, let's just say then you take that data and you send it through some kind of AI that you've built to use your frameworks and your methodologies to analyze that data. Now your consultant can look at that data and spend a lot more of their time making good decisions based on that data, rather than trying to analyze the data. And then they're able to take that and add way more time and energy into the value of the actual output than into trying to get all of that data to begin with and analyze it manually. And I mean, AI can go through so much more data so much faster than a human could. I know that then you have issues with hallucinations and issues with maybe them things maybe not being as accurate, but at the same time, I mean, you can have it just buzz through something almost instantaneously. So I think there's a ton of value when you're doing something like that. But then, today I was sitting with a client, and we're going through, okay, how do we figure out where the biggest pain points are in your market? And a lot of it's just these two partners sitting down and talking about it together, and me being there to help add some insight into that. AI is not going to replace that, not anytime soon. It would be really hard to replace that because it's institutional knowledge in their heads. mixed with the expertise from my head to bring that to something valuable. And that's where it's like, how can I use AI to spend way more of my time and energy doing that kind of a meeting, and then taking whatever output and using AI afterward to make it more usable without me having to spend my time doing that.
I love that you're talking about AI models, because 99% of the investment right now in the AI space is going into either the foundation models, which simply means the large AI labs that are producing these large language models like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google Gemini, XAI, Grok from Elon. And then the rest is going into vertical specific LLMs or AI agents. And so they're taking the natural language processing capability, the ability to have a chat interface that's backed by a model, and then they're applying that to a specific domain or specific problem. So that's where you get agents. Most people think that having a bigger, better, faster model is going to help them. And there are certain cases, where that's probably true. And these big firms like the ones that I just mentioned, that's what this race is. How can we train the best, fastest, most accurate, the best reasoning model? That's not necessarily what's best for corporations or for small businesses. In fact, there are places where small language models are actually more specific. When you want to control the output very specifically, having 150 billion parameters that goes into this language model, you significantly increase the possible responses that you're going to get. Yep. So then you get into, okay, well, how do we train a specific AI model based off of my for my use cases? And that's really a lot of the work that we're doing. Is we are helping small, mid-sized businesses build their own language models in their own environment that's trained on their data. And so what we tell them is and what we're helping multiple customers doing is turning their data into memory. But then we deploy their own unique language model specific to their business that learns as they go along. So every conversation that they have, like you just mentioned, those two co-founders, that are talking back and forth, the tribal knowledge, every conversation that they have goes into their model. It's not going into training, these larger foundation models. It's staying within their environment, but their own model is learning from every single conversation. So we think that's a way that where the market is going, and not to detract from any of the work that's being done by the big guys. But I think there's certainly a use case where people have tribal knowledge, or they have maybe trade secrets, or they've got sorry, I cut you off, but they've got some sort of intellectual property that they want to protect. And they say, I wish that I had a model that or an AI that's mine, that's ours, that we could control. And so that's really what we're doing.
Yeah, because with the big guys, their goal is to just get as much investment as they can. So they're going to focus on the things that investors think are going to bring in a ton of value in the long run. That doesn't mean that what they're doing is necessarily going to help you as a small business. Now, where that's a little different is smaller companies.
It's not universal. I would say it can be. The work that they're doing is absolutely needed, and I'm not trying to detract from it. But I don't believe that AI is a one size fits all, and that you just use this one super language model to do everything. I believe that if we're expecting that type of a future, I think that's maybe we might get there. I'm not going to try to predict the future. I will hypothesize, but from the conversations that I've had with customers, they want something that they get to control, and that's within their environment, that they have the confidence that from a privacy standpoint, they don't have to worry about all their information getting out into the public.
Yeah, and if we focus this conversation on what people probably want to hear, which is more like, here's how you can use AI to double your business in a year, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but a lot of that ends up being hype when it comes to actual implementation, right? And this is where I think the point that I'm getting at with that is, I think there's a couple ways as a small business you could think about this, and it probably depends on the size of your business. And this is where I kind of want you to give really practical input. One is, a lot of software companies are going to continue to show up, and more and more will show up that have specific AI tools for all kinds of different businesses. And so on one sense, some businesses are going to be better off just waiting for a tool that's tailor-made for exactly the stuff that they're trying to do, because then the software implementation ends up being on the software company whose focus is software, not whatever it is that you do. And I think there's a lot of companies where that makes sense to do that. And it also depends on the size of your business and all kinds of different factors, right? But there's going to be tons of marketing specific software that's going to come out to use AI. And then all the tools that you already use are going to automatically implement AI. So there's going to be a lot of ways that small businesses use AI, whether they like it or not, because it's going to be implemented in tools you already use. And so everybody is going to see a change just by default. And, if you can find the right tools and, be using software that is focusing on that, you're going to be better off. But then to your point, what if you have this institutional knowledge that you don't want to just take and upload to ChatGPT and let them take your info? Or, you feel like there's a stronger use case beyond using a pro version where maybe you can have it not train their models, but you're still putting the info in there. You do have this institutional knowledge. You want to build out your own frameworks, and you really want it to focus on your specific IP, not on the generalized knowledge of the industry. Because the whole value that, especially as a consulting company or something like that, a huge portion of your value is the way that you do things, and you want your AI to do things the way that you would do it, or give information the way that you want it to. And that seems like an area where there's a ton of value in creating, these custom environments. So I'd love for you to kind of dig into when do you see the value in just using tools that already exist, or using industry specific tools to implement AI for a small business? And at what point do you see the value in saying, hey, we should bring in somebody to help us create something a custom environment for our business?
I think it's a both and, not an either or. I think that we will always probably use, I think you used the term, I think, off the shelf AI tools, things that are developed by really smart people that have a lot of domain expertise that, take their process, they turn it into an AI, and then, make it available for a subscription charge. I think there's certainly a place for that. But I don't think that we should think, at least in the long term, that that's going to be the most efficient way of doing it. Because think about, let's use an example where you're a 10-person company, and most of your employees have been there for since the beginning, or average tenure of, let's say, 5 years. There's so much domain expertise that just resides in their head, and the processes that they know just instinctually, the context awareness that they have. So when a customer calls and they see on the caller ID, and they're like, okay, this call is so much more. It's not just a call coming in. It's okay. There's a lot that comes into this phone call. I know what I'm about to get when I pick that that phone up, and so they're prepared for that headspace. Whether it be well, I won't go into the specifics on that. But now let's say that one of those employees leaves the company, and now you're having to replace them. You're having to put somebody that can do the same action of answering the phones, or customer service, or engineering, whatever it is, but they don't have all of that context and all that history. That is a really disruptive thing for any business, but for small businesses especially. And so what I would advocate for is that small business owners, or business owners of any size, think about building their own company specific AI, their own company specific brain, if you will, that has all of their tribal knowledge. When an employee leaves, if a employee leaves, a sales guy leaves the company, and you replace him with a new salesperson, if the memory, if you will, the data becomes memory for the new salesperson to come in. Now, when they're saying, hey, when was the last time that we talked to ABC Manufacturing? Well, they can ask their AI, and it can say, well, Tony talked to ABC Manufacturing on this date. Here was the outcome of the call. The customer asked for this. We weren't able to provide it, and here's where we left things. Now, when that new sales rep goes to introduce themselves and say, hey, I'm so and so, your new sales rep, they have that context that didn't just leave with the employee that left. That gets passed down for them to be able to interact with. Then once you have that company specific context or memory model, then when you're using all these other add-on off the shelf or third party tools to do certain functions, it's doing so with the context and the intent very clearly identified based off of your company, and it's not just general based off of what that model has been trained on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. So then, can I have two follow-up questions? So don't go too deep on this next one, but I think one concern with small businesses really any business implementing AI is, how do I protect my IP? How do I ensure that when I'm putting my IP into any kind of system that it's not stealing that data? So how can, if a small business is going to try to implement AI on their own data, what are the considerations they should be making to make sure that their data is staying secure?
I mean, this is the very problem that we had for ourselves, that we are out to solve for ourselves and for others, is we want an AI that's our personal AI. And so, this whole memory concept came about just by us trying to do it for ourselves, because we have, our whole experience from 15 years, 20. My partner is a little bit older than me, so he's got 25 years experience or more in this space. So how do we take what we have and how do we turn it into an advantage that allows us to keep up and to offer something to the world without it just becoming part of a larger model? And they say that they don't train their models, and let's go with it. But I like having the confidence and the control. And so we started building this for us. And the more we started talking to customers, it resonates with them. Because then it allows us to do intelligent automation, which we haven't really talked about, which probably be a topic for a different podcast. But intelligent automation is what comes after artificial intelligence. And so there's a book by Pascal Bernet. There's several books out there, but intelligent automation is when AI has reached a point where it's capable of doing a lot of the tasks that even knowledge workers would do, the cognitive tasks. How can we now stitch together AI together to be able to accomplish really complex workflows that are directed by humans? And so that's really the direction where I think that we're, or the future that we're trying to bring about, is skating toward the intelligent automation puck. And it's going to require that you have this kind of model. But our approach to it is deploying that in your own environment. And so rather than trying to be the controller or the arbiter of everyone's data and saying, hey, give it to us and this is our moat, we're actually saying, no, we want you to have the moat. And so we're coming in and deploying these things in our customer environments and giving them that ability. We have a hosted option where it's in our servers, if you will, but it's not going to one of these larger, it's in our Azure instance essentially. So a couple of different options, but I would be thinking about, how do I deploy an offline model rather than just using something generic and off the shelf, as you say. Was there a second question that I didn't get to?
Yeah, I wanted to start with that part of it around the security piece first. And I mean, as far as that goes, it's like, all these art related, all the video and art related AI models are like, oh yeah, we have permission to use everything. But then there's all these artists who are like, this is putting out stuff that looks essentially identical to my artwork. And then they can get away with it because they're like, well, it's a derivative, it's different enough, whatever. Right. And it's like, so how do you know whether they are actually maybe not directly using your information, but using the frameworks or the ideas overall, and then using that to train their models? So how do you really know that? And if history is any indicator, probably can't totally trust big tech. That they're going to be not skirting the line as far as they can. So probably a good idea to be, thinking about that. And then another thing is, a friend of mine that does a lot with AI also, and implementation, has talked about your employees are going to use AI. They're going to use it in their job. So either they're going to use it within the way that you set it up, and that they're only going to use it the way you set it up if it actually makes their job easier. And if the way you set it up makes their job harder, they're probably just going to go around what you're doing and use something that's not vetted. And so then by not doing something like what you're talking about, your employees, if you have a large enough company, you almost definitely have employees who are just going to take information and put it in ChatGPT and make their job easier. And they're not going to be able to afford using something really complex and security related. So your data is going to be going out if you don't have a way to, a better, easier way for your employees to be doing it internally. And I mean, good luck trying to keep that from happening. So, instead,
that's right.
Especially if you have a lot of IP that you're using, way better to start thinking of how do you get this stuff to be leveraged for you and, for your employees to be able to use it as easy as possible. So how do you see AI shifting the competitive landscape and the small business world? And I kind of want to say this, a little bit hyperbolic, kind of going back to our first question, is like, on the one side, I think there's people who are like, it's going to be like here and gone, and it'll be a blip. And then there's the other people who are like, universal basic income, or, nobody's going to have a job anymore. So, where do you fall on the scale?
It's pointless for me to make a prediction. I will make a hypothesis. That's what I just got to keep coming back to. I think it's probably helpful to think about what's not going to change. And I think what's not going to change is that as humans, we are social and community ingrained species. And so we live in communities, most of us. We live in community with others. The way that we work, the way that we socialize, the way that we, entertainment and the things that we do for fun. It's just, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about AI therapists, and I think there's totally use cases for AI therapy, and I might even use one. I'm not knocking that, but there is a difference between digital empathy from an AI, even if it's extremely good, and human empathy from a friend. So if I'm going through a tough time and I want somebody to talk to, there's a time and a place for having a virtual assistant that is also trained with this therapy module that I can just say, hey, can I vent for a second? And I'm sure that's already out there, and hey, that's awesome. But then when I go and have a cup of coffee with a friend, and I'm sitting and I'm like, hey, going through a tough time, like, this is kind of hard, and for him to say like, I'm really sorry, and I'm with you, it means something. It feels different, And so I think the things that aren't going to change are really helpful for us to think about. That's what Bezos famously said. All the things are going to change. He's like, I just am making the prediction that people are probably going to want products at cheap prices and want fast shipping. I don't think that's really going to change. I don't think anybody's going to say, hey, it's all good, but it arrived a little too soon. And so he's kind of building around some of those things that aren't going to change. And so as we think about it, that's why human intelligence, we often use the term augmented intelligence rather than artificial, because we as humans, we have just ingrained value and God-given traits and abilities and things that we want to amplify and that we want to celebrate, and we want the augmented intelligence, or AI, to support that and to give a amplified or mobilized way of scaling their value to more people, rather than trying to replace them. So to answer your question maybe more less abstractly,
well, I mean, while you're working on that, something that comes to my mind is we spent a decent amount of time with all these people who are like, oh, it's going to replace all our jobs and it's just going to be the end of the world. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Kenya, and there's people doing a lot of stuff manually that, trust me, it's way better off that nobody's doing that work here, because we have machinery to do it. And, does it provide less bottom of the barrel jobs that nobody really wants to do, truly, that where they're not using their full capacity as a human? No, that's that people don't want to work those jobs. And in the States, we have a hard time filling those kinds of jobs anyway. And so is the world worse off because you have a tractor that can plow a field in a couple hours than a field that would have been plowed by 50 people? Obviously for the people that need that work, it sounds horrible, but then there's other job opportunities that do become available, and they're typically higher paying, higher value, higher leverage opportunities. And so will the landscape of the world change? because of this, yeah, I do think 100% it's going to change, and there will be jobs and industries that will be eliminated. It's going to happen, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden we aren't going to need to work, because humans have to work to have dignity, and so we'll find ways to, like you said, have relationships, have community, have meaning in our life, and AI is going to, at its best, be facilitating that. And I think when it doesn't facilitate that, it might work for a couple of years, and then there's going to be a ton of pushback if it's going too far. And so, I think your point about that is salient.
And where you went, I was struggling to this. I'm going to make a big statement, and maybe somebody will fact check me in the comments, but I'm not aware of any advancement in technology throughout the course of history that has had an overall negative effect, like a net negative impact on employment and opportunity. So yes, things have changed, but with every change comes expansion. So I mean, we have machines that cut down trees instead of guys cutting trees down with axes and sawing lumber with saws. Now we've got machines to do that. But would we say that the mass automation of the lumber industry has had a negative impact on society? It's created so much more growth opportunity from a construction standpoint. So I'm very much kind of aware of, and I'm actually probably more of the in the camp that believes that we're going to hit a series or a hyper scale pace here pretty quickly. But I don't think that should be something that we fear. I think that's something that we should be cautious about. But it really starts with what I said at the beginning, to just kind of demystify it. What are the processes that are very manual and repetitive and rule based, and can I automate any step of that process? And if we continue to have that type of a mindset, I think that 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, we'd be surprised with how many things that we have, offloaded to AI that have a very positive effect on our business. And yet I think we'd probably say that our businesses are better off for it, but structurally, there's probably not a whole lot, different from a negative standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, and I, from a business standpoint, and just in how I use AI in some form pretty much every day. And I basically use it to get rid of all the stuff that I hate doing. And it's awesome because I had something that took me hours and hours to do that can be done instantly. And, does that potentially eliminate work for somebody that would have done it? Potentially, yeah. But then my clients are able to get better work faster. I'm able to do my job faster. And at this point, I wasn't outsourcing that work anyway. And so, it does create improvement, and then it gives me opportunity to invest in other things in my business or other areas of my business, or improve the output for clients that goes way beyond what I would have been able to do, because I was investing in stuff that AI can take care of instantly that would have been hours and hours of work before. So totally agree with that. Okay, last thing for you is, how are you helping businesses, and where's your company going? Kind of what's the vision for what you're doing?
Yeah, so Virtual OS is our company, and we're working with small and mid-market companies to turn their data into memory and deploy their own specific, unique language model, which then allows us to build custom automations on top of. And so, in an ideal world, if we do our job right, we work ourselves out of a job, if you will, because we're charging them on a more consulting basis. But if we do our job right, we're able to drive costs down, and them have their own unique AI that is trained on and continuously learning on their specific data, and it allows us to get closer to that intelligent automation or hyper automation future that I think that we're skating toward. And the thing that I love the most, I have a somewhat technical background, but I'm not an AI researcher. I don't have that background. My partner does. But the thing that's so rewarding for us to do is to sit down with business owners that are solving real world problems, and they're focused on their target client, and the work that they're doing. And I get to come in and help them think through, here's how you could be using AI to deliver a better product, to deliver faster service, to do so at a reduced cost. Those are the things that are really fun, and we really enjoy demystifying it for non-technical users, and bringing that kind of peace of mind that they're going to be able to compete, not just keep up, but to compete in the future, and they're not going to be left behind. I would actually say I am more excited about small mid-market businesses because the barrier of entry, or the moat that big tech, there's a big moat that they've had, a competitive advantage. And with the democratization of a lot of these knowledge and skills that can be done, with AI, this is the golden age for small businesses, in my opinion. And I think we're going to see a boom. There's 33.3 million small businesses in the United States today. I think we're going to see that number shoot up because the amount of capability that we're going to have to be able to compete in markets or arenas that we wouldn't have been able to compete because we just gotten squashed from a capability standpoint. We're going to be able to compete in. So I think it's the best time to be a small business owner.
I love it. Well, with that, thanks for joining me, and thanks to everybody who's watched the show. I definitely agree with you that, just being a little bit forward thinking as a business owner, and thinking of how you can implement AI using your own processes, and not letting these big companies steal all of your information is important. So if people are in those shoes where they've got a lot of IP, or they have things that they want to protect, but they could get value by automating those processes, definitely reach out to Connor. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Joseph, thanks for having me.